How you doing? This is a special edition of Let's Talk Ball. I'm Thad Brown. That's Carl Jones. We're going to preview round one of the NFL draft. And we might get into some more talk about players who will go deeper in the draft. But generally, this is a talk about round one, what the Bills should do, what to expect, what type of prospects to be found in round number one. And Carl, let's start right there. You know, to me, this year, round one of the draft is not super exciting. I think at the top of this draft, you know, almost doesn't matter what position you talk about, there is not that elite guy, or at least not that many of them. You know, there's not a Penei Sewell on the offensive line. There's not, you know, a Jamar Chase at receiver. The quarterback's even kind of average. And I think this is the kind of year where, you know, you'd rather have a bunch of picks day two than a bunch of picks day one. Now, there will be some studs in this draft, and we'll talk a little bit about guys who we think might be those players. But, you know, for the Bills at 27, you know, at first you think, well, then that's good. They're low in the draft. Well, I think what's going to happen for the Bills is that they're going to be picking from a group of guys who you normally prefer to be taking pick 40, pick 45, pick 50, round two guys, because the elite talent isn't there. Now, I think on the plus side, there are some positions where maybe the top-end guys aren't there, but I like the depth at tackle. I like the depth at edge rusher. If you need a slot receiver, this is your year. I mean, there are 1,000 of them this year. Even the depth at running back is pretty solid. So I don't know if the top-level guys are there, but the thing I go into this draft thinking is that if you want a really good or dependable player who probably won't be a star, you're going to find a lot of those guys in round one.
Not a lot of blue chippers, not a lot of guys where you're like, I don't like the term, but generational, or some guys like that. Like the 2021 draft I was looking at the other day, like that draft was Penei Sewell and Devonta Smith and Jamar Chase and just all those stud guys. You're like, yeah, that's
like 10 guys in that draft might go before anybody in this draft.
Yeah, like no kidding about that. So I don't think this draft is that. Having said that, though, you spoke on other positions, edge rusher, tackle, and by nature quarterback. I don't know what type of run we're going to see at the top of the board just based off of the scarcity and the value of certain of those positions. We're already hearing that, like the quarterbacks aren't going to go outside of one. Quarterbacks might not go 2 and 3 like we expected at one point. They might drop a little further. So what does that do for the other positions, even though in a normal year it's going to be edge and quarterback at the top, no doubt about it. I don't know how the draft breaks out in that regard. So I am excited to a certain extent. Most years, all right, we know 1 through 7. We got a good idea, right? Adam Schefter has no idea what's going on 1 through 5. So that is an intriguing part for me.
Yeah, it is going to be a fun, like, you know, there are some years where, like you said, first 4 picks might be done before Thursday. Outside of Bryce Young at 1, and even that I'm not a huge fan of. You know, I think if you're Carolina, I don't know why you trade all those picks to go up and get the little guy. But, you know, it's a quarterback. You have to get a quarterback with that pick, and I get it. So let's do a couple of best and worst here. First, give me your favorite offensive player likely to go in round number 1.
Well, I know this isn't the sexy pick, but Bijan Robinson, there's just what's not to like about this dude? And speak on the word generational. Outside of Saquon Barkley, I don't know of a running back out of the past maybe 10 years who compares to what he brings to the table. You want a guy who can run between the tackles, he got that. You want to go on the outside, he got you. Out of the backfield, I can bring that for you too. There's a really attractive player in a lot of different ways. On the Texas offense, they didn't really have a lot going for them. They had a backup quarterback for a lot of the year. The offensive line wasn't stellar. He was running into, I know it was Big 12 defenses, but it still wasn't a lot of room to work with. I mean, he's making something out of nothing a lot of times. So really exciting player. I remember him coming out of high school, a big 5-star recruit, and he lived up to it and then some at Texas. So whoever's going to get him is going to be a lucky team, and hopefully they already have a structure in place where he doesn't have to do everything in the next level.
I'm with you. That was going to be my favorite player. I got a second choice I'll talk about here in a minute. But I think Bijan, you know, you talk about generational guys in this draft, he might be the only one, and he won't be treated as that because he's a running back, and you just don't want to, you know, spend too much draft capital at that position. But, you know, the reason when people start talking about him going number 10 to the Eagles, I'm not blinking at it, you know. And before the Bills signed Damian Harris from the Patriots, I really thought Bijan at 27 would make a whole lot of sense. You talk about a guy that can make up runs on his own, who has the quickness. Look, if this play isn't blocked up, that's okay. He's going to jump and dart and move around and be able to find 3 yards. He's got the home run ability. He's got all the different dimensions that you talked about. So I think Bijan can be a really great offensive player. And, you know, I respect the analytics crowd that'll tell you, never, ever spend a first-round pick on a running back. There's, you know, a ton of logic there. But I will say this. Every rule has an exception, and Bijan might be that exception. Now, since I can't pick Bijan Robinson, I'll let you take him. My favorite guy in this draft is Dalton Kincaid, the tight end from Utah. And look, I think there are tackles that I might say are my favorite. I mean, Darnell Wright has some interesting qualities. I think Broderick Jones is a second-level offensive tackle, could be really, really good. But Dalton Kincaid has that speed aspect that in a speed league, I think can be really, really dangerous. Now look, he's coming off a back injury that's got everybody nervous. Played at Utah, which isn't exactly Alabama, but obviously they're in the Pac-12, so it's not like they're nothing either. But Kincaid, I think, can be an incredible weapon in the NFL. And, I think you hear tight end talk, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington, who I'm going to talk about in a minute. To me, Kincaid is the one that has the most likely to achieve upside. The guy who really can be that A1 weapon, as a tight end in the NFL. So whether he becomes that, I don't know. He's undersized. He only goes 240. And if you think, well, 240 seems pretty big, go home and Google what the other guys are. Kelsey's 250 plus. Mark Andrews is 250 plus. A guy like Dallas Goedert still runs 250. So when a tight end's going only 240, that is a concern because you don't want that guy to only be someone on the outside. He's got to be able to block a little. And I think Kincaid's blocking ability is good, but when you talk about him being undersized, that is a red flag that should be taken seriously. All right, I'm going to, against my better judgment, I'll let you do this again. Defensively, give me your favorite defensive player likely to go in round number one.
Well, I'm going to go with the cornerback position because that's my bread and butter. And I got to go, staying in the Pac-12, Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback from out there, smooth as butter.
I love him on film. Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you watch him, the kid's only 20 years old, which is kind of scary when you think about where he can end up as a player. Originally at Colorado, and that's where I heard of him last year. I kind of lost him in the translation a little bit coming into this year.
Transfer portal will do that to you.
And then you watch a couple Oregon games, especially week 1 against Georgia where it didn't turn out too well. But after that, you're like, some kid out there at corner that's doing this thing. I know I don't like comparing guys to all-pro guys, but I can't get Marshawn Lattimore out of my head with how smooth a taller guy is with the longer limbs and how he can get in and out of breaks. He may not be Sauce Gardner in terms of the physicality and all that stuff. Once again, there's not a generational guy in any position in this draft, outside of Bijan probably. But he's so smooth for a taller guy, and those guys are rare. Most of the guys who are smooth are shorter because by nature, your limbs are shorter, closer to the ground. Of course, I can get in and out of breaks. But when you get the guy who is 6 foot, 6'1", who runs a 4.3, who can get in and out of breaks, productive enough ball skills, those are the guys who end up being Pro Bowlers and All-Pro to the next level. I can't wait to see where he ends up. I know Devin Witherspoon is another guy who might go top 10 with him. But if I had to choose between those two, I'm choosing the traits guy in that position. And Christian Gonzalez is exactly that.
Of the three guys we've talked about, that's the only one I think the Bills have zero chance at. Christian Gonzalez will be gone early. They could take Bijan potentially if they wanted to. I think Kincaid, wouldn't be a terrible option for the Bills. You talk about them needing a tight end. I projected them in our Bills mock draft special, our Buffalo Kickoff Live mock draft special, to take Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I think Mayer's got a little better floor, but Kincaid could be an option for the Bills. My favorite defensive player, I think, is a guy that might be on the fringes of being available to the Bills, but I don't think he projects as a guy the Bills would take in terms of who he is, and that's Nolan Smith, the pass rusher from Georgia. This is a smaller guy. He's like, if you build like a safety, like 6'4", 230, 240, but again, incredible speed. And if you're wondering, wow, Thad went with the speed guy again. I am buying in 100% to the idea that this is a speed league, and all things considered, I'm taking the fast guy. I don't care if he's undersized. I'm going to roll the dice with the guy that can get there faster than your guy can. And look, he needs some work with technique and hand fighting. He's not quite there yet with having an array of pass rushing moves. But when you see the production he had in the SEC at Georgia, as an edge rusher, the ability to go outside, and he has a chance to be a pretty unique chess piece because he can drop into coverage like a safety. He's built like a safety. He moves like a safety. A sub 4.40. How stupid is that for an edge rusher?
I remember that on Combine Day. I'm like,
yeah, right, an edge rusher, yeah. So, the things that could be done, I mean, you think about what Micah Parsons has done as a speed attacking defensive player. Smith is not a linebacker, but, who knows where you can deploy him, So now, why won't the Bills go after him? He's not a big guy. I think if the Bills, generally their profile is big and fast, So I think for an undersized guy, they're going to shy away, especially a guy they'd probably have to trade up to get. But I love Nolan Smith in this draft. And I think of all, people talk about Will Anderson, and obviously I think he's the complete guy. I think Nolan Smith is way better than Lucas Van Ness from Iowa. I don't think Van Ness is even in, Nolan Smith's zip code. Miles Murphy, to me, is another guy I don't think touches Nolan Smith. So that's the guy I like best in terms of the defense. Let's go overrated, underrated, okay? I'll let you go first again. Overrated player in round one of the draft. This can be either side of the ball.
Staying with the edge group, I understand. Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. I'm not saying he's not a good player, but for where he is being talked about and where he's projected to get picked, I just don't know if I see it. There's talk. He's projected right now, according to the betting sites, to be the first defensive player off the board, which could be all the way as high as 2 to the Texans.
That's stupid.
And I can't see that. And look.
Now, I guess if we think about it, though, Jalen Carter is off the board because of off-the-field stuff. So all he's got to do is beat out Will Anderson to win that, basically, right? And Gonzalez, maybe?
Gonzalez as well. And, I mean, they already took Stingley last year, so would you want to spend top 3
Right, if
picks?
he's going 2, yeah, I can see Will Wilson. Okay.
But when I see it, I just don't know if I see that caliber of player. I'm seeing comparisons to, oh, he looks like Myles Garrett. Oh, he looks like Nick Bosa. But can he play like those two guys? I mean, I remember Nick Bosa at Ohio State. Albeit he only played there 2 seasons, he was a monster there as a 19 and 20-year-old in the Big Ten. I remember Myles Garrett at Texas A&M. He was a monster, and I believe he was still in the Big 12 at that time. But regardless, if you're in the Big 12, which is probably the 4th best Power 5 conference in the NCAA, I need you to be at least dominant to a certain extent. And I know it's pressure rate and all the analytics, they say he's good in that department. But he wasn't dominant enough for being in that conference. And look, I get it. He's like 6'5", 6'6", 271, outrageously long arms, I believe 35 inches. So he looks like he profiles as a guy who's supposed to be a perennial all-pro guy. But on tape, I didn't see it. I didn't see the bend. I didn't see the explosiveness off the edge. I saw a guy who can two-gap a lot of stuff and be a good run defender. But I don't take good run defenders in the top 5. I take guys who can go get the quarterback 10 to 15 times a year. So good player, but generational top 5 pick, I don't see it.
For my overrated guy, I actually had a lot of choices. You know, I thought about Murphy, lower first-round pick. I didn't want to go there. Brian Bresee, the defensive